This is the second part of the video where we're building a pretty big model to optimize the selection of vacant land based on the two input criteria, which were can't be within 200 feet of an existing stabilized lot to try to spread the wealth around, and that must be as close as possible to this school that we are analyzing. Where we left off, right, we have been selecting the first iteration. We selected vacant parcels that were more than 200 feet from the newly developed parcel that we don't want to overlap with. We made a copy of that we'll going to use at the end of this just to show you what's been done. And I told you this is where we're going to start to branch into two directions. We made a feature layer, excuse me, which is essentially just like a layer copy, and essentially made it just to hang out for later. This is what we're going to flow back into this model, so that each time when we're selecting from the macro vacant land here, it's going to get successively smaller because we've selected out a number of areas that wouldn't meet our first criteria anymore, which is that you're within 200 feet of a lot. But now we actually need to begin the next criteria, which is measuring our distance to the school. So we know we're going to use that, so we can drag school in. It's my choice, but I'm just going to store the school kind of up here. And, it's sort of like reminding myself that school's going to come into this model at this point, and we're going to use it, but I'm not going to really use it for much else. The tool I'm going to use is one called near. You could also do this with spatial join closest if you want. But this is kind of the way I decided to do the process. Point distance would have worked too. You'll determine what's best for you. But I drag in near, double click to remind myself of what near is. Near is a tool that just measures distance and proximity. And the way it works is it wants an input feature, and the near features is like, what am I measuring my distance to? And it has no output. As we'll see in a moment, all that near does is it creates a shapefile that appends a field called near FID and near dist. So it just tells you like, hey, the FID of the school I was closest to and how far away I was in whatever units were projected in. So in this instance, it would be feet. So what I want here is the eligible lots, obviously, the land, the vacant land that's eligible to be chosen from. That's going to be the input feature. That's what I want to append distances, and then they're all going to append their distances to how far they are from the school. That's the near features. So we are nice and complete. Notice there's no output, right? It's essentially just taking this data and bringing this back. That's kind of the whole purpose of it. Essentially right there. Takes the eligible lots and appends a distance to it. So I can show you kind of what this looks like. We go to model, and we could run, and it'll do its thing. Blah blue. Can't remember if I told you to add yourself to display. I'll tell you just for a second. Add yourself to display. So we can kind of open it. Those were the eligible lots, right? So we started with the vacant lots. We selected only those because those were the ones that were more than 200 feet from this pink thing. And I made a copy of it so we could always be looking. And we can notice if we go to the end of that copy that there are two fields here, near FID and near distance. The school has an FID of 0. And because it has an FID of 0, that's why they all appended that, because we're only dealing with one school. And it tells you kind of how far away they are. So, to get the minimum, there's a couple ways to think about doing it. We could try to write some kind of mechanism that would look at all the values and find the minimum. Or you could try to think like how you would do it visually, right? How would we do this visually? We'd probably just sort ascending, and we'd literally pick the minimum, right here. And if it was a tie, it wouldn't matter. We could pick kind of either one of them. So by picking that one, that would be the one that has the slowest number of distance. So I want to actually do the next step with a series of tools that emulate that process, something that almost imagines we sort this, ascending or descending, and then strip out whatever that first value is, so that we know this is the data piece that we are going to be going after for the remainder of the time. So let's see how we would do this. Validate our model. Get rid of this. Turn off my add to display for now. Hit save. All right, so we've kind of created a near thing. And in order to kind of emulate that process, right, to find the minimum, you can actually sort. You know, that's what I was trying to say earlier, and the reason we're doing this instead of a more complex process is almost anything we can do with right-clicking or, you know, visually an arc has a tool associated with it, and the vast majority of them are in the data management tool set. So if I go to data management in general, there is actually a tool called sort, which will do exactly what you think it will do. It will just sort the data. So I can come here, input U, and open sort. Now, I think I may have been a bit misleading when I said, you know, all it'll do is sort the data, because it actually creates a new output based on the sorted data. So, like, let's say, for example, you know, if I were to open the, you know, the eligible lots that I just removed, and, you know, we sorted it, and we found out that, like, the near distance was 148.3. Well, that's because we sorted. That's actually like the record that came 505th, right? That has an FID of 505. So what sort would actually do would be to sort it and then kind of re-export the data in that order so that the lowest or the highest actually becomes FID1. It becomes the first thing that gets processed whenever you run data. You know, like whenever you run a tool, all the tools we run start somewhere. They calculate some field first, right? They calculate you know, or measure distance somewhere first, and it's always that which has the lowest FID. So I would go to sort and, you know, just literally say, hey, sort based on the near distance and do it ascending, right? So that I have the smallest near distance coming up first, right? So that's pretty simple. And then in terms of what we're going to store the output as, output is going to become just something that we put in memory. Oh, didn't mean to do that. So if I were to kind of rethink this, double click it, you know, we don't actually need this, so I'm not going to save it in a folder. I'm literally going to say in underscore memory backslash, and we'll say percent value percent, or sort, sorry, in value sort backslash sort percent value percent. Just meaning like we're creating something that exists in memory for a second that says the word sort and then appends 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 depending on where it is. Its whole reason for existence, this sort, is to create a copy of this data, right, the eligible parcels that are organized in such a way that the first value is the lowest. And I'm doing that so that I can introduce another tool to you. If you right click, you'll see these things that are called model only tools. There's about 8 of them. We are going to primarily focus on 2 today, collect values and get field value. Some of the others are good, but they involve like a little bit of Python, so we'll integrate that for the last 2 weeks when we start reviewing Python again. But as you can imagine, they are called model-only tools because you can only use them in Model Builder. That's why they exist, is to offer new functionality here. Get field value is what we're going to do, and it actually does just what it's saying. It lets you take a value from a field, but it does it in a particular way. If you click it, it says, I will get the value of the first row of a table that you provide. Well, there it is, the reason that we sorted. Because if we sorted so that the distances went from lowest to highest, the first value we come across would be the lowest distance. So we can actually take that and use it for our purposes later. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, hey, that sorted data set, get a value from it, get a field value. And the cool thing is, we don't need to take the distance because we already know, because we sorted it in ascending, we know that the first record we come across is going to be the shortest distance to the school. So let's actually take another field that we can use later. Let's take parcel ID and store it as a long. We'll take parcel ID and we're going to store it as a long so that we can reuse it as an integer later on. There we go. So since our last video, what we've done here, we have taken the lots that are eligible, right? Those things that I've shown you before, right? Anything that is more than 1,000 distance from here, we've taken those, and we measured the distance between them and the school so that we could have a new field appended to it that said near distance. Then we sorted those so that the lowest one came first, and then we used a model-only tool to actually strip that value out so that we can have the parcel ID stored here from that lowest sorted one. And I can give that a name, right? I can come in and actually maybe even name you parcel ID, knowing that I'm going to use that later. So I'm going to pause the video right here. We're going to be using parcel ID for the next one to advance to the next step. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.